There was a woman who was burning potatoes in the field, but suddenly she was visited by a man in a state of panic. It turns out that the man is wanted by 2 Nazi soldiers. This man was hiding in the woman's skirt. When 2 armed men came to the mother, they asked, "Did you see anyone running around here?" The mother said that she saw the man running like out of hell. But the soldiers didn't believe the mother's words, and finally, they discouraged them from going back to chasing the man. When the 2 men moved away, this mother suddenly became aroused, which turned out to be the man in the mother's skirt. He was not only hiding, but instead he was enjoying the mother's hole. Long story short, they actually live together and have been blessed with a child from the results of burning potatoes in the fields. They were both named Joseph and Anna. After all this time, it turns out that Joseph is still a fugitive from the Nazi army, and he escapes again by being forced to jump into a lake. Even after that incident, Joseph was never seen again. People also thought that he had run away to America and become a timber merchant there. As the years go by, now, Anna is a goose seller in the market to make ends meet. When the First World War started, Anna was no longer selling geese, but she was now selling vegetables. And now, the child of the relationship with Joseph has grown up. She was given the name Agnes. And here, Agnes was waiting for her cousin named Jan, who was called to take the military service test, but did not pass due to health problems. Jan and Anna were happy about that because Jan was not going to go to war. But it turns out that these 2 cousins have fallen in love with each other, or have had an affair as a pair of cousins. Because it was very against their family, Agnes finally had to marry a cooking teacher from Germany named Alfred. At that time, Jan was still approaching Anna. Their love was never separated, even though Anna is now married to Alfred. Time passed, and Agnes is now in the maternity hospital to give birth to her child. It is not known whose child Agnes gave birth to because their love triangle is very confusing. Agnes gave birth to a son named Oscar. On that day of birth, Agnes said that at the age of her 3-year-old son, Oscar should be able to play the drums. As time went on, Oscar was now 3 years old, and as his mother hoped, he could not be separated from playing the drums. The relationship between Jan and Agnes still continues. That day at Oscar's birthday celebration, he saw his mother and uncle making out while playing the piano, even though they really loved Oscar, but that night they ignored it, which made Oscar Moody make the decision that from that day on, he just wanted to be 3 years old forever and stop growing like a normal person. To fulfill his dream, Oscar accidentally drops himself, which causes him to have a concussion. And Oscar's hopes came true, because the concussion would hinder his growth and psychological condition, and even Oscar's parents had to obey all the wishes of the child. But when Oscar broke the drum, his father tried to take it and promised to replace it with a new one. However, Oscar became angry and shouted very loudly, even breaking the glass on the wall clock in his house. Oscar finally realized that he had a superpower, a scream that could break glass. Oscar's own age continues to grow, although not physically. He is now entering school age, or 6 years old. On that day, Oscar was sent to school by his mother. However, on the first day of school, Oscar caused trouble by continuing to play the drums during class. The teacher had asked Oscar to stop, but he was stubborn enough to play it, and that made the teacher angry. He then tried to take the drum, but what happened was that Oscar started screaming. Then Agnes took Oscar to be examined at the hospital. The doctor there tried to examine his spine on the grounds that it might have something to do with the accident that Oscar experienced 3 years ago. But because he wouldn't let go of the drum, Oscar screamed again. The doctor was even amazed by Oscar's abilities and intended to do research for his medical paper. The doctor's paper was finally published by medical journalists, and this made Oscar's family and relatives feel proud because he was in the news. But Agnes and Alfred were still fighting because Agnes kept blaming Alfred for causing her son's accident, which has now affected Oscar's psychic condition. Even Agnes still blames her husband because Alfred at that time let the underground door open. And because at school Oscar was always naughty, Oscar now has to study at home so he can read and write. He was taught by his aunt there, but as usual, Oscar couldn't keep quiet. He was even more impudent. Oscar even asked to read a Rasputin story. One day, Oscar was insulted by his friends. He damaged Oscar's drum. He went to town with his mother to buy a new drum at once so he could have other activities and no longer be a burden. After visiting his uncle Jan, who works at the post office, they then went to the shop owned by Mr. Marcus. It seemed that he was also fascinated by Agnes. Marcus was even willing to give Agnes a silk hat, which was quite expensive at the time, even though Mark already knows that Anna is married. After Oscar chose the drums, Agnes asked Marcus to leave Oscar for 30 minutes because Anna had important business. However, it turns out that Agnes has made an appointment with Jan, which turns out to be fun with January, while Oscar secretly followed his mother and knew that they were both having fun. Then Oscar climbed into the tower and shouted. One day, Oscar was invited to watch a circus performance by his parents. There, he became acquainted with a circus performer named Bebra. Bebra is a direct descendant of Prince Aguini, who was the son of Louis XIV. Bebra also stopped growing, just like Oscar, and he knew that Oscar did it on purpose. Bebra and his colleagues were amazed by Oscar's abilities. He even invited Oscar to join them because they are people who have skills and are not suitable to just sit in the audience. On Sunday, Jan returned to Agnes' house to stay in touch. That day, Alfred was preparing to go to Hitler's event. After Alfred left, Oscar told Jan that he and Jan both had blue eyes, and actually the one who wants to intend to tell Oscar that he is the father. While Jan and Agnes always make out whenever they meet, including when they were at the beach, Alfred actually didn't have a problem with it because Jan and Agnes had the same bloodline, and that wasn't going to happen, thought Alfred, although Alfred himself never openly said that he knew about their illicit relationship. Then they met a man catching some eels by using animal headbait, which made Agnes disgusted and vomit, but Alfred didn't even care, helped the man, and then bought it. Alfred, who is a chef, immediately cooked the eel and forced Agnes to eat it on the grounds that the eel had been washed clean. But here, Agnes still refused, which made Alfred force her. Their argument makes Oscar dizzy, and he hides in the cupboard. Agnes, who could not stand Alfred's anger, went to her room and cried hysterically. Jan even approached him to calm his cousin. The presence of the cousin apparently succeeded in making Agnes calm down and stop crying. In fact, he also ate Alfred's cooking earlier. Since that day, Agnes has also undergone a change. She felt that problem kept appearing and wanted to choose one of the two men who always filled her heart. Agnes also confided in Mr. Marcus. In her heart, Agnes clearly preferred her own cousin, but Mark suggested preferring Alfred, who was German. If he chose Alfred, Agnes' safety and future would be assured. So, choosing Alfred is a better decision, or he can also choose Mark, who is willing to be Oscar's continued father and promises to take them both to London. But Agnes did not intend at all to accept the offer. Agnes was getting more and more stressed every day and started to experience depression. She has now started eating sardines straight out of the box without cooking them, even eating all kinds of raw fish, which made Alfred run out of ways to calm her down. He was forced to call Anna, Agnes's mother. Here, Agnes said to her mother that her life's problems continued to increase and that she felt that she was no longer able to handle them. It seems that Agnes is now pregnant with her second child, but Agnes herself does not know who her biological father is. Days passed, and Agnes finally died of an overdose from eating raw fish. Then the Nazis got even more violent and annihilated all the Jews. Sept. 1, 1939. The situation heated up because of the shooting of a Nazi soldier. Nazi troops carried out attacks throughout the city as a form of retaliation. The Polish post office where Jan worked even became one of their main targets. Meanwhile, Jan, who had been there, was eventually captured by the Nazis and executed, while Oscar was saved because he is the son of Alfred, who is a German. One day, Alfred's father-in-law brought a woman named Maria. Maria is still 16 years old. Maria needed Alfred to become a maid. She is in charge of washing, mopping, taking care of Oscar, and other household chores. Maria's charm captivates Oscar and makes him fall in love for the first time. As they were together, Oscar became curious about Maria's pussycat. One day, Oscar tried to make sure they were going to swim at a beach. Initially, Maria was angry, but because Oscar was still small, she finally forgave him. In the evening, Alfred will go to work as a warden in a Nazi prison. He left Oscar with Maria, but that actually makes Oscar very happy because he can sleep with the woman of his dreams. When Maria was about to go to sleep, Oscar took out their favorite soda powder. Maria is also fighting over a soda with Oscar. The next day, Oscar overhears a noise, which turns out to be his father having fun with Maria. Oscar was immediately angry and annoyed them because he did not accept that Maria was having fun with his father. This made Alfred very angry at Oscar, but Maria stopped him because she thought it was Alfred's fault for being too noisy. Alfred even scolded Maria because she always asked him for more. Alfred asked Maria to return with friends who had something in common. Maria was very sad to hear Alfred's words. Time continued, and finally Maria was pregnant with Alfred's child and was about to give birth soon. Oscar was very angry because he was pregnant with Alfred's child. In short, Alfred and Maria's child was finally born. This makes Maria comfortable and replaces Agnes. Alfred's extended family accepted Maria well, except for Oscar, who thought that the child was his. Oscar also said that when a child is 3 years old, he should be able to play the drums like himself. If one day the child does not want to grow up, Oscar will tell how to do it. Meanwhile, Bebra is now a circus performer for the Nazi army. Then Oscar came to Bebra, and Bebra introduced Oscar to a woman named Roswitha. Roswitha manages to make Oscar fall in love and forget about Maria. Then they invited Oscar to join the circus to appear to entertain Hitler's soldiers. Of course, Oscar also accepted the offer, and Oscar will appear for the first time in Paris. Oscar was part of Bebra's tour group, and this togetherness created the seeds of love between Oscar and Roswitha. And now, they are even more affectionate. All circus performers are always free where Nazi soldiers are on duty. They followed all the activities of Hitler's soldiers. At that time, the war was still going on. Even the United States managed to bombard the Nazis, including the residence of Hitler's father in Paris. They were forced to leave the location so as not to become victims of an aerial bomb attack. But unfortunately, Roswitha had to die when he took a cup of coffee. This incident made Oscar immediately decide to return to Alfred's house. And right on that day was the 3rd birthday of her son, Maria. He brought a drum as he promised. Oscar's return turns out to be the focus of the Nazis because of his special ability to break a glass. Their neighbors apparently reported Oscar's return to the Nazis. He immediately went to Alfred's shop, and they asked Alfred to cooperate, but Alfred doesn't want to let them take Oscar, because Oscar will be admitted to a clinic. Alfred even clashed with Maria because of a disagreement. Since then, the Nazis have been increasingly pressured by American and Allied attacks. Alfred has also begun to lose hope because of the glory of the Nazis that he has always voiced. At that time, American soldiers searched every corner of the city to look for people with Nazi blood. They also managed to find Alfred and his family hiding in the basement. One of Alfred's relatives, named Roma, became a victim. Then Oscar gives the Nazi pin to Alfred. While the Allied soldiers were still there, Alfred tried to swallow the pin to hide his identity. Alfred died because he was thought to be fighting the American army. Afterward, Maria continues to grieve over Alfred's death. He was visited by a man named Fajgengold, who came from Hamburg. Fajgengold's goal there is to take over Alfred's shop. In fact, he also offered Maria the opportunity to become a shop clerk later, so they don't have to move. Fajgengold also helped with Alfred's funeral, which turned out to be his body still in the cellar. At that time, Oscar also buried his drum and promised that he would grow it back at the age of 21. But suddenly, the stone thrown by Maria's child returned to affecting Oscar's brain. Even he grew back like a normal human. Then Maria finally decided to take Oscar and his son to the West. Even though Maria received an offer to marry Fajgengold, she refused it because she wanted a better life in another country. Then it's over.